AEW is back on the road in a normal building with a massive audience, and it felt like things were back to normal. It felt like a normal wrestling show before the pandemic, and this crowd was really hot, and they mic'd the crowd significantly better than last week. So that is a huge plus. Overall, this show was an excellent show. There were a few lulls in the show where the crowd was down a little bit, but you know, that's basically you can't have a wrestling show that is all up the whole time. There's always going to be places where there are some dips, and we'll talk about those. Also, I think they tried to cram too much stuff onto this show. We ended up having 6 matches on this night. 5 tends to be the right number for AEW because they give the matches a lot more time than other promotions do. So cramming 6 matches onto the show was probably not the way to go. And we'll talk about all that fun stuff, but we had a cracker of a main event, and we'll talk about the ratings at the end here, but it's going to be a good night for AEW coming back here with a massive live crowd. So you are listening to the That's Wrestling podcast. If you're listening to this as a podcast, we do this show live over on YouTube and Twitch. So follow the links in the show notes to those channels so you can follow along over there, especially over on YouTube. If you hit the bell icon, it will let you know as soon as we schedule a live stream. Not so much needed for AEW coverage because we tend to do that the evening after the show, but since New Japan has a really unorthodox schedule, they don't have the weekly shows or whatnot, it helps to be alerted of those shows. So follow over there, and of course you can watch over on Twitch if that is your preferred platform of choice. You can follow us on the Twitter at That's Wrestling 1 with the number 1 at the end. Comments, question, feedback, you can send those over there or to Eric at thatswrestling.com. You can also go to thatswrestling.com to snag the RSS feed to listen to this as a podcast if you cannot find it in your favorite podcast app. Once again this week, I am going solo. Trey is taking a few weeks off to do some educational stuff, so he will be unavailable, and just haven't had any backups to join me. So going solo once again. So let's get into this. So tonight we are talking about AEW Dynamite from July 14th, 2021. Like I said at the beginning, this crowd was super loud. They were going nuts since the beginning of the show. And of course, Jon Moxley is the first person to come out in front of the live crowd for Dynamite. Of course, they already had taped a couple matches for Dark, so he wasn't the first one of the night, but this is the opening of Dynamite, and of course, probably the biggest star that they have seen so far of the evening. And better miking over the crowd, and it was a very hot crowd. And this was the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship match, and it was Jon Moxley defending his title against Machine Gun Karl Anderson. He and Doc Gallows are heading over to Japan sometime soon, I am guessing, to do some work over there with New Japan. I'm sure we're going to have World Tag League coming up. I'm not sure on the dates on that, especially because the G1 got moved. I'll have to reacquaint myself with the schedule of New Japan at the moment. Falling a little behind at that. But Karl Anderson was announced as being from Tokyo, Japan. So he's laying that in. He wants to bring the title back to Japan when he goes to Japan. And Kingston came out with Moxley. Gallows came out with Anderson. Kingston attacks Gallows on the outside from behind with a pipe. And Mox and Anderson started off in the ring when this happens as well. Gallows and Kingston, they fight their way to the back and they are not seen again. So we have a straight one-on-one. This is, they announced, under New Japan rules, of course. The one thing I would really like to see when they do New Japan matches in a different promotion is have, especially when it's a New Japan title match, is to have a New Japan ref. They had an AEW ref here, but it was New Japan rules, so it was 20 counts on the outside. Yeah, I think they need to bring in a New Japan ref if they're going to have a New Japan title match. Also, this kind of came into play. I'll talk about that in a minute, but and then having their timekeeper on the mic counting off the 20 counts. I think it would just give it a nice little New Japan flair when you have a New Japan title match on an AEW show. So they stand, throw forearms in the ring. Anderson is sent to the outside. Mox runs him into the barricade. They fight over to the ramp. Mox gets suplexed over on the ramp. They exchange chops, drop each other on the barricade. Mox bites Anderson in the face. Anderson gives Mox a cutter across the top rope. And while they're on the outside, the ref is doing the 20 count, but he's doing it at the 10 count speed. So the 20 count's going to take like 3 minutes at the 1, 2. And if you're not listening to this podcast at normal 1-to-1 speed, that might have seemed faster. But in New Japan, it's like 1, 2, 3. So there's not that massive delay. So really a 10 count in like AEW or WWE probably would end up actually being like a 30 count in New Japan because they count at a different pace. So this, the count was never going to get close because they were counting ridiculously slow. Anderson gave Moxley a cutter across the top rope and hits a running drop kick, sending Mox off the apron. Mox gets a few shots in when he gets back into the ring, ends up eating a spine buster from Anderson. Anderson goes up top. Moxley follows him, bites him in the face. He did this actually earlier when they were fighting on the outside as well. So this is the second time he bit him in the face. Avalanche suplex. Moxley blocks a stun gun attempt gun stun attempt from Anderson. They end up clotheslining each other twice in a row for a double down. Moxley puts on the rear naked choke, lets it go for to get into a pile driver position, but he can't hit it. Anderson hits him with ape shit, and Moxley kicks out. We get a flying neck breaker from Anderson to Moxley for a 2 count. Anderson gets out of a paradigm shift attempt, hits the gun stun, but Moxley rolls over towards the corner, so Anderson can't cover him. Anderson then hits another gun stun, and he gets a 2 count. Moxley blocks a top rope gun stun. He ends up hitting a Rainmaker and then hits the paradigm shift and gets the victory. So Jon Moxley is not only the longest reigning IWGP US champion, he has the most successful title defenses as well at this point. This match was really good. I mean, it was really worked as a New Japan style match. Lots of striking. Of course, that never-ending 20 count. A little ridiculous. So get New Japan refs in there for New Japan matches, and that would probably make it better. Next up, we go from this to Jake and Lance Archer in the back. So Lance Archer, of course, lost the title to Jon Moxley to start the current reign that Jon Moxley is in. And he basically says, you took the championship from me, and he wants a rematch. And since they're going to be in Dallas next week, and their match at the Tokyo Dome was a Texas death match, this time they're going to do a Texas death match in Texas. So he challenges him for the IWGP Championship once again, and again in a Texas death match for next week. So a no-week build, really a 1 week build, just this show for another IWGP title defense. Kind of crazy, because one, New Japan rarely does title defenses in such short order, except of course they've done it at the Tokyo Dome the past couple years with the double championship and whatnot. But here we have a quick turnaround and no build up. It just feels like they should have at least gone another week if they wanted to do this at Fight for the Fallen, and I don't know what they are doing with Archer at this point. Lance Archer has been up and down. He's been babyface, heel. Well, he's been heel, babyface, heel, babyface. He's been flipped back and forth. I was really excited when Lance Archer was coming into AEW, but at this point, he just is really there. I mean, there's really been no mission statement, really. And at this point, Jake isn't helping the act. And Jake is just, I don't know what is up with Jake. He has just been losing his touch with promos. And really, he brings nothing to the act at this point. Especially because the last few promos of Lance Archer's basically been cutting the promo, so Jake is kind of just like an afterthought. He doesn't even need to be there. So, yeah, it is what it is. We'll see where it goes. I'm assuming Moxley is going to continue to retain the championship. I don't see that changing here in Dallas next week. So. Next up, we have Alex Abrahantes. He is with Andrade El Idolo, and he wants to ask about Andrade going after championships everywhere. And Andrade says, hold on, I have a question for you. Where is Death Triangle? I want you to give them a message. El Idolo is looking for him, or looking for them. That is a good question from Andrade. Where is Death Triangle? We have not seen the three of them together for a very long time. We haven't seen Pac for a while. Yeah. I'm not sure what is going on. So, yeah, and of course, last week we had Penta and Kingston going after the tag titles. So where's Phoenix? Where's Pac? And where is Death Triangle? It is a very good question from Andrade, and he just takes his leave. Next up, we had Ricky Starks versus Brian Cage for the FTW Championship, and they start off a little bit on the miscommunication side. Ricky takes a swing, but Cage ducks it and just starts going after him. They totally mess up this hip toss spot. Cage screws up. Basically, it looks like Cage is like super weak. He can barely hold Ricky over his head in like a military press, and Brian Cage should easily be able to hold Ricky Starks up over his head. That shouldn't be a problem. Cage runs him back and forth between a couple corners, running him into the turnbuckle, hits power slam for a 2 count. Starks moves out of the way of a Brian Cage running into the corner. But Brian Cage slowed up so much, and it was such a weak run into the corner. Again, it just these two just did not seem to be work. I don't know. I think something was wrong with Brian. He just did not seem to be 100%. Like I said, he was having issues holding Starks over his head. Totally screwed up this hip toss spot. This run into the corner looked completely weak. And Starks starts working over the arm a little bit. Brian Cage catches Starks with one arm, throws him up onto his back, and again, here he gets hit with a crucifix bomb, but it looked so bad. It was just another botch here. Brian Cage gave Stark this crazy, it was like a face-down Falcon Arrow, but Starks gets a foot on the rope. And then he ends up eating a kick for a 2 count. Starks and Brian Cage ends up getting sat up on the top rope facing the post, and Starks pulls him off, hits him with a power bomb for a 2 count, and then we have Powerhouse Hobbs and Hook running out to the ring, and Starks was gonna grab the FTW belt, and Hobbs took the belt from him. Cage hit an F5, only gets a 2 count. Hook then pulls the ref, and behind the ref's back, Hobbs wails Brian Cage with the belt, and then Starks hits a spear, gets the pin, and Ricky Starks is the new FTW champion. And he got such a massive pop, you would think he was the babyface in this situation, even though clearly it's supposed to be Brian Cage who's the babyface. I'm curious how they deal with this going forward, given the crowd response was really in favor of Ricky Starks. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. Next up, they do a recap of Malachi Black coming to AEW last week. Cody comes out and he gets on the headset over with commentary, and he is just raving mad. Talks about Malachi Black. A phone call would have sufficed. He calls out Tommy End, Malachi Black, whatever your name is. And Black pops up onto the screen, says that, Cody, did you hear the fans cheering when I kicked you and Arn in the face? It's because they're violent. They don't care about you as much as you care about them. He talks about seeing a man having to kill his prize horse. He says after years of wear and tear, winning titles, that horse was crippled, and the one thing he could do was let the horse go out with dignity. So he took him out to his favorite field, put a bag over his head, and, well, here we are, Cody. When I look at you and Arn in the eyes last week, just wasn't there anymore. And then Cody says, well, why don't you come down here and take a better look? And Black says, I hope that's what you were going to say. Lights go out. They come back on. Malachi Black is in the ring. They start throwing hands, and they end up with a pull apart. All the refs run down and pull the two of them away from each other. Of course, the crowd starts chanting, let them fight, let them fight. But that is the end of that segment. Next up, after the commercial break, we have Alex Marvez. He's talking with Tully when they run into Santana and Ortiz in the back. And Santana says, you want to talk like a smartass and walk around these halls alone? Ortiz grabs Tully, holds him. Santana has a crowbar. He swings it, but stops short of his head, and then taps him on the forehead with it. And it's actually a fake plastic one, and they mention as such, but next time it won't be. And then Santana says, we were taught to respect our elders, but look at you. And they walk off and leave Tully there on the ground. And that was it. We then have another segment here. So one thing about this show, they had a ton of non-wrestling segments as well. And having 6 matches with all these other non-wrestling segments, they were just rushed for time at the end of this show. So we had Tony. He is out in the ring, introduces Hangman Page. Page comes out, says since day one he wanted to be the AEW World Champion, and he got close but failed. He says he's tried running from it and hiding from it, but the Dark Order is right that he needs that championship. So here he is, the challenge for the All Elite, and Don Callis cuts in right there and says, "You're not here to do anything. I just hear you talking. Here in Texas, we call that all hat and no cattle. And, you know, when you look in the mirror, you're just not that guy." And Gallows comes down. Basically, all the Elite come down. And Gallows says the same thing. Matt says, "I hope you don't mind. I have something to say," right to his face. So Matt, he gets in the ring and he says, do you remember me? Do you remember us? You abandoned us for a bunch of losers." And says that he can smell, I can smell by your breath that you have been hitting the bottle, and you're just a lonely drunk cowboy. There's only one person to blame, and that's yourself, Adam Page, and you're the next great wrestling tragedy. And here Hangman Page punches Matt in the face. He punches Nick in the face. Gallows and Cutler get taken out as well. Then Kenny gets in the ring behind Hangman. He has the belt. It looks like he wants to hit Hangman with the belt. Dark Order come down for the save, and they all stay with Hangman in the ring. Hangman says, "I came here for a match, and I'm not leaving until I get one." And Kenny says, "You want a match? We can do that, but I see by the look in your eyes, you want me in the ring by yourself." So Kenny proposes a 5-on-5 elimination match between the Elite and Hangman and the Dark Order. Hangman says, "Not the match I want, but that's good. That's gonna do. But when we win, I get the title shot for the world title, and these guys, they get a tag title shot." And Kenny says, "You make a lot of demands for someone not in a position of power. Thing is, we don't get anything in exchange. So after we beat you, not only do your boys lose a shot at the tag titles, but you lose yours as well. You can just go back home." And Kenny says, "They say you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, but you also don't fail as well. Isn't that what you're afraid of, Hangman?" And then Hangman says, "The Dark Order doesn't back down, and Kenny, you're on." So looks like we're going to have a 5-on-5 match with the Elite versus Hangman and 4 of the guys from the Dark Order coming up. I'm assuming they're going to win, and we're going to go on for Hangman versus Omega at All Out. That's pretty much the only thing that makes sense at this point. So this is a really good segment all around. And as much as I would like to see somebody punch Nick in the face for talking, Matt is a significantly better promo than Nick is. So it would make sense that Matt would be doing the promo here. Next up, we have Alex Marvez with Chris Jericho, and he asks about the stipulations laid out from MJF. Jericho says, "I don't really care what you put in front of me. I'll walk through fire, crawl over broken glass to get a match against MJF." Spears then cheap shots Jericho in the throat with a chair, and in comes MJF. Says that the first match for Jericho is next week against Shawn Spears, and the stipulation is that Shawn Spears can use a chair, but Chris Jericho cannot. So the first of the 5 stipulations that Jericho has to get through before he gets to a match with MJF. Next up, we go back to 2002 because we have Matt Hardy versus Christian Cage. And this match, while it was a fine match, stood out like a sore thumb on AEW television because this was the most WWE match I have seen on AEW. They lock up in a collar elbow tie up and they just start pushing each other around. They even fall outside of the ring and continue in the lockup. What I think would have actually made this work is if they continued this even longer, and this type of lockup would have worked better. They went past the point of like a beginning collar and elbow tie up and like went to the extended part, but they didn't go over the hump of extreme of holding that thing and just pushing each other like all around the ring and all around the outside. I think if they would have held that even longer, it would have gotten better. Cage gives Hardy a punch off of the apron, and then Cage does a dive over the post to the floor. We get a reverse DDT in the middle for a 2 count. Bunch of punches from Christian in the corner. Hardy pulls Christian through the ropes, gives him a draping DDT on the stairs. We get a neck breaker from Hardy back in the ring for a 2. The crowd is pretty quiet at this point. Hardy throws Christian to the floor, drops Christian over the barricade. Hardy works a sleeper in the ring during the commercial, which is like the most WWE thing to do, is just hold a headlock during the commercial break. Yeah. Hardy bounces Christian's head off each of the turnbuckles, the top turnbuckle, then the middle turnbuckle, and the bottom turnbuckle. As soon as the commercial is over, Christian avoids a twist of fate and gives Matt a spear for a 2 count. Again, this is like the most formulaic thing to do. Commercial ends right there. Christian turns around, makes a comeback immediately. Like, no pause. They need to work these things out. Either you start making the comeback, 30 seconds before you come back, or you continue the heat just a little bit longer after you come back from commercial, then you start your comeback. But starting the second the commercial is over, it's okay for the live crowd because the live crowd isn't aware and doesn't have those cues. But when you're watching on TV, the second they come back from commercial, Christian's just going to turn around, or whoever was getting beaten up during the commercial is going to turn it around immediately and start making their comeback. This is something they gotta fix, and this one just stood out like a sore thumb just because of how formulaic this match ended up being. So Christian avoids the twist of fate, gives Matt Hardy a spear for a 2 count. Christian hits a frog splash for a 2 count. They fight up top. Hardy hits a superplex, so he gets a 2 count. Christian wants the kill switch, but Hardy grabs the ref's shirt, hits Christian with a low blow back kick, hits a twist of fate, but only gets a 2 count. Hardy and Christian are on the outside, and Hardy puts on the leech, which is his new submission hold, I guess. He lets it go, gets back in the ring, tells the ref to count. Cage barely makes the count. And then he just hits the kill switch and gets the win. So, yeah, this match was like super formulaic, and then the end made absolutely 0 sense because of Cage was like taken out enough that he barely makes the 10 count to get back into the ring, and then he just pops up his kill switch and gets the win. So, the match was okay. I just could not get into this match, and the crowd was pretty much not into this match either. At this point, I am pretty disappointed in Christian Cage in AEW, even though he is one of my favorites of all time at this point. He needs to up his style a bit and modernize his style a little bit, because this match just felt so old. It felt like 20 years ago, this match would still not be, it would be fine. 20 years ago, this would not be a great match or anything. This felt like, 20-year-old match. After the match, we have Private Party and Angelico running down to the ring. They surround the ring, but they can't do anything. Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus run out and run off the Hardy family office. And then Christian is celebrating up on the corner, and Luchasaurus then lifts Cage up onto his shoulders. And while he's walking around with Christian Cage on top of his shoulders, Jungle Boy is just looking up at Christian on Luchasaurus' shoulders, and he looks a little incensed about the thing right there. I'm assuming this is not Jungle Boy turning heel, because that would be like the dumbest thing to do, is turn like one of your most beloved baby faces heel at this point. I'm assuming this might be just a little bit of a red herring. It was specifically called out by JR, so I'm assuming he was fed that to say it, to specifically call attention to it. So whether this is a red herring or not, I am not sure, but that's what I think it is. I think in the end, it's really to get something out of Christian at this point. Turning him heel is probably the best thing to do. Next up, we have a Miro pre-tape. Miro has a new TNT belt. This one has a white strap with some green color fill. So this is like the fourth iteration of this belt. They had the kind of the temporary first belt. They had the completed belt, which then got retired and given to -1. Then we had the black strap belt that Darby had lost to Miro. And now there's a new belt with a white strap and green color fill on the front plate. I'm curious if this might just be something they're going to do. They're just going to have a bunch of different colors, and they're going to, let the talent decide which one they want to use. Because now this is the fourth belt in just over a year of this title existing. So I'm curious what they're doing here. Anyways, Miro says, "Let me tell you a story. There was once a rich man with a hot wife who could do the splits. This man was hot too, but he lost who he was because he wasn't being himself. He walked out of his house into the void to search for what's next. After a few months, a voice from above said the man should forgive himself and remember who he was. For that man, fear was his power when he warned everyone, if you have a title, you have a problem. He wasn't a selfish man. He forgave everyone he destroyed in his path. This made him God's favorite champion, and this was his reward, holding up the TNT championship. Everyone in this business knows they should be willing to defend their titles with their lives, but I defend this with your life. I am the Redeemer." So, Miro, again, continuing on his string of some of the greatest promos in recent history here. And, being scary. Next up, we had Tony Schiavone. He is in the ring. He introduces Britt Baker. Tony asks about getting put through the table by Nyla recently. Britt says, "Don't worry about my well-being. I had to deal with multiple ladders and multiple tables and multiple chairs and thumbtacks. But you know what? The blood stopped, the wounds healed, and I came out the baddest bitch in AEW. But you know what's daunting? Keeping Nyla Rose relevant." She says that Nyla is at the top of the food chain, but you know what? I'm off the menu. I'm special order. And hey, Vicky, I know you're back there. You have a last name that will keep you relevant forever in pro wrestling, but your client, not so much. Because Nyla, you need this title to have any significance in AEW, but it's not going anywhere but back around my waist where it belongs. And Vicky backstage cuts this crap promo to the camera. Basically, she just squeals saying that Britt's days are numbered. And Nyla says that Britt has been handed things her entire life, but next week she's going to hand her an ass whooping. That's just how it is. What the hell is Nyla talking about? What has been handed to Britt? I am curious, because that's not part of Britt's storyline, and we all know her legit path to getting to where she is. So I don't know what Nyla is even referring to. What was handed to Britt? Nothing's been handed to Britt in storyline, so why is that being claimed? So, one, is Britt turning babyface? That seems to be a question on everybody's mind. She was super over here. She was clearly the fan favorite. And Nyla is clearly a heel and is more of a heel than Britt. So is Britt just going to continue to be this character, and basically the audience will go back and forth depending on who she's facing? Because, this character is a little bit full of herself and whatnot. But this particular promo was a very babyface promo. And very strange to have a turn while holding the championship. That's something that you rarely see. It does not happen often. And if they do it and Britt is just going to start being this badass, and she ends up being a babyface for that, fine. If she does throw in a little bit and being kind of full of herself, I mean, Rebel was not with her, so she didn't call her Reba or something like that, or talk down to her. So I am not sure. She didn't make fun of Tony, anything like that. This is a full-on babyface promo from Britt Baker. So I'm a little confused what their end goal is here. Is it just... One, I don't even know why Nyla was going to be the first challenger to Britt right out of winning the title, but it is. So once we get past this feud, hopefully then we have some sort of inkling on what their actual plan is, and if they're planning on having Britt be a babyface, full out just a badass babyface, or if she's gonna be the heel going forward, just after Nyla being the most heel of the heels basically on the show. So we'll see, but I'm really waiting for this match to get over with. Britt Baker, I don't see her losing the title this quickly, and I have a feeling this match might be a bit of a train wreck, because Nyla is not that good. Britt is still green. She did have a wonderful match with Thunder Rosa, but she is still pretty green, and I'm hoping they are working on this match now, and it's put together and they're working on it to make it the best it can be, and hopefully next week is not a train wreck for the title match. Next up, we have Jon Moxley. He's responding to Lance Archer. I talked about this earlier. Again, really, we're going to have a 1 week build to a Texas death match for the IWGP US Championship. I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but okay. Mox says, once said that you don't just beat Lance Archer, you survive Lance Archer. Looks like Lance Archer wants to end my career, but you know what? I'm not the hunted, I am the hunter. And there's only one boogeyman in AEW and New Japan, and that's Jon Moxley. You may be Texas born and bred, but next week you will be Texas dead. So fine. I'm not sure if that was supposed to rhyme or not, but it did. Fine promo from Jon Moxley as always. Next up, we had Wheeler Yuta versus Sammy Guevara. I basically have not seen any matches from Wheeler Yuta. He has been working over on the 2 Dark programs, but looks like it could be good. I look forward to see him more because this match was pretty fun. They started off with some rope work going back and forth. Sammy hit like this crazy, no pause, just pick up and drop him, Death Valley driver. I am not sure what Excalibur called it. I think he called it a suplex, but it was pretty much just a straight pick up straight into a Death Valley driver. Sammy goes up for a moonsault. Yuta rolls out of the way. Sammy lands on his feet. Sammy does a standing moonsault. Again, Wheeler rolls out of his way. Sammy lands on his feet, and then he hits a running standing shooting star press for a 2 count. He goes up for a shooting star press off the top. Wheeler gets his knees up. Wheeler hits a springboard dropkick off the second rope. Hits a released German. Wheeler hits a splash off the top, but only gets a 1 count. And then we get a massive backdrop from Sammy, double springboard cutter from Sammy, and then a GTH, and Sammy gets the victory here. It was fine. Crowd massively over for Sammy, or I should say Sammy is massively over with the crowd. So I think he was even caught a little off guard about how over he was on the babyface side of the ledger here. So this was fine, but it's one of the matches that didn't need to exist given that they clearly had a time crunch going here. So yeah, they probably could have cut this match and it would have been fine. Next, we have earlier in the day with QT Marshall. Basically says nothing. QT is mad and pours a protein shake over Tony Schiavone's head. That was basically it. This kind of went nowhere on this one. Next up, we have Penelope Ford and Yuka Sakazaki. So Yuka making her return back to AEW. Hopefully she is here on a more full-time basis, but from what I hear, that is not the case. And she'll be going back to Japan at some time soon, which is a real bummer because she's one of the best ones that they have from Japan, her and Riho. But I believe Riho has actually moved to the U.S. So we have a couple arm drags right away from Yuka, boot to the face a couple times, a drop kick, and then Ford rolls out of the ring. Yuka hits a cannonball off the second rope to the floor. Good thing Yuka only weighs 109 pounds because she landed full weight on Ford's sternum off of this cannonball off the second rope to the floor. So luckily she's only a $109 for Ford at least. Back into the ring, Ford kicks the knee, drop kick to the back. She does the back handspring elbow in the corner, running boot, and then a release German suplex. Ford hits the double knee drop on Yuka on the apron. She puts on the Indian Deathlock, and Yuka crawls to the ropes. They do it again. Crowd is pretty meh for this match, even though I liked it. Even the commentary, they were just pretty quiet. They didn't know what to say. It was really subdued, even from the commentary team. They start throwing hands. Yuka powers Ford over with a suplex. She hits a rolling kick to the face, sliding lariat for a 2, and then Yuka hits a running knee, and then a diving back elbow for a 2 count. Ford hits a pump kick for a 2. Yuka hits the magical girl splash and gets the victory. This match was fine. Again, I think they are rushing, and I'm hoping to see more Yuka Sakazaki in AEW, but I believe she is not full-time with the promotion. A little bit of a bummer there. Next week, we have Nyla versus Britt Baker for the AEW Women's Championship. We have Orange Cassidy versus The Blade. So we're getting that singles match here. Lance Archer versus Jon Moxley for the IWGP US Heavyweight Championship in a Texas death match. And Chris Jericho versus Shawn Spears, where Shawn is allowed to use chairs, but Jericho is not. We have a short Rampage commercial, which starts on August 13th, so just under a month away here. One of the taglines in it is less distraction, more action. So I am hoping that is the case. when that show starts. And I'm guessing we'll probably maybe have like 3 matches on that show with like maybe a couple really short, like pre-tapes or something like that on that show. So looking forward to it. Kind of have what Dark used to be before the pandemic. And then we had the final match of the evening. Again, I think they were rushed for this match. This match, I don't think started until like 9:47. So they had like 13 minutes to get through this whole thing, plus what little they had post-match. So I'm curious, if they had cut anything, if it would have been better if they were given more time, but they were up against that. This is kind of one of those times where AEW should definitely work with TNT and see if they can get, permission to overrun if they need to, like give them, leeway to go 10 minutes over if they have to, but be like, try to get it done within the hour. If you need to go a few minutes over, fine. Just don't make it a regular thing so they can use it when they need it, so they don't have to cut it when you have a huge match like this. You have their first ever Coffin match in AEW history against one of your biggest stars, Darby Allin, against one of your biggest up-and-coming stars, Ethan Page. This match should have been given more time. I don't know if I want to say you should give Darby Allin more time to hurt himself, but there's no reason you should have to have them rush this match. This is clearly a match that, get with TNT, be like, we're going to go over like 5 minutes. Please, please, please let us go over 5 minutes and get that worked out. And I mean, that's just something that should happen every week. Just have say, you can go up to 10 minutes over if you have to. Please don't make it a weekly thing. That's it. And this would have been one of the times you pull the trigger. All right, we're using the overrun, that type of deal. So Darby we have the Coffin is carried out to the ring by a bunch of people. They set it off to the side. It's actually pretty oversized, which is funny given the size of both the guys. Although Ethan Page is actually deceptively big. Darby goes straight after Page, and he does a springboard coffin drop, and he is wearing a back plate. And this dumbass takes it off after he hits the springboard coffin drop, and Page rolls to the outside. It's like, well, why don't you leave it on? Because immediately Darby does another like running dive through the ropes and like hits him back first. You figure, keep the plate on. It's no DQ, so what the heck? He walks over to the coffin. Scorpio Sky pops out of the coffin and throws Darby into the ring stairs. This then cues Sting to run out. Comes down, fights with Scorpio Sky. Sting misses a splash on the they start fighting out in the crowd. Sting misses a splash and he splashes himself right into the hockey boards. Sky is standing up on the boards and is celebrating. Sting pulls a leg out from under him. He crotches himself on the board, and then they fight off to the back. Page undoes the bottom turnbuckle off of one of the corners. So basically he's taken the bottom rope off of the ring. Darby and Page end up fighting out into the crowd. We see Wrestling Jesus at ringside. This is a character I have seen in the past, pre-pandemic. I believe he was like following them around because I'm pretty sure I remember him being in Boston. Darby does a dive off of one of the balconies. Page catches him, runs him into like the railing. They fight. And Page beats Darby Allin going all the way back to the ring. We have a Jesus chant as they went right past Wrestling Jesus once again. Page throws the ring stairs into the ring. And the thing about the ring stairs in AEW is not 2 separate pieces. It's actually just one big piece. So the only way he'd be able to get those stairs into the ring is removing that bottom rope, because they're just too tall. You wouldn't be able to fit them in. So that ends up making sense there. He pushes them into the middle. He ends up dropping Darby face first onto the stairs. Page grabs one of the turnbuckles. or actually, Paige gets thrown into the ring stairs. Darby drops Darby face first. Paige grabs a turnbuckle, uses the hook that hooks onto the outer post, and he hooks Darby's necklace with it and pulls him down by the chain necklace. That gets a "you sick fuck" chant, which those are always funny to hear because that is one of those things. Darby actually ends up grabbing it later and ends up fish hooking Paige with the actual hook as well, but he does not get the chant in response. Darby drop kicks the ring stairs into Paige. Paige rolls to the outside into the coffin. Darby goes to the outside. They're standing in the coffin fighting. They are just giving each other strikes. Paige slaps Darby a bunch of times. Darby bites the hand. Darby then gets backdropped out of the coffin onto the floor. Paige is bleeding from the head here. Back into the ring. Paige climbs the stairs with Darby on his back, but Darby fights out, hits a flip over stunner. It looked like Darby was going to hit the coffin drop onto Paige, who was laid out on the stairs, but Paige gets up, climbs up the top rope, and he throws Darby Allin, hits an Ego's Edge off the second rope onto those ring stairs. He ends up bending the ring stairs, but I do have to say, Darby Allin landed like as flat back, as much spread out as possible on top of those ring stairs. So that probably wasn't even that bad of a bump, given that it did bend. So it did take out some of the blow, and he landed as flat back could be on those stairs. So good on Darby for having the control of his body, but also Ethan Page for launching Darby at an appropriate angle for the Ego's Edge and allowing him to land safely. Darby and Page fight back towards the coffin. Darby bites Page, rakes the eyes, and then goes up top, and with his skateboard does basically a drop-in double stomp to the back of Page's the back of Paige. Paige falls into the coffin, and then Darby closes the lid and gets the win. And post-match, Darby then goes up to the top rope and does a coffin drop off the top onto the coffin lid and crashes through the lid onto Ethan Page. And that is how we go off the air. Darby is a little crazy. I thought that he would do a coffin drop into an open coffin onto Paige and then close the coffin. That's what I thought was going to happen. But that is not what happened, but we did get that big spot at the end there. So, this was a really good match. Like I said at the beginning, they really needed the overrun because this match felt rushed. The match, Christian Cage and Matt Hardy felt rushed. So I just think the show was good, but I believe it was poorly timed and people were rushing for things. But overall, I thought it was good, a good show. Just with a little downs here and there. They kind of lost the crowd for the women's match, and the Matt Hardy Christian match were kind of the lulls in the crowd. But the crowd was super hot for the Ethan Page Darby Allin match the entire time. So good on them. And looking at the numbers here, it looks like AEW is back up over 1 million viewers here. There were 1,025,000 viewers. So I am curious what the quarters look like. I'm curious how high the main event drew. I'm thinking the main event was probably the highest segment of the night. So I'm looking for the quarter hours to come up. But year over year, Dynamite was up 30% in viewership and 37% in the almost 38% in the demo over last year. So pretty good. And they are now running back to 1 million viewers after the issues in June being pushed to Friday night. So hopefully they continue this momentum. I mean, next week the the card is looking decent. We have a women's match. We have the women's championship match. We have the U.S. heavyweight championship match. Orange Cassidy versus Blade. I think that's probably one people want to see. Jericho versus Spears. I'm assuming there's going to be at least one more match announced, and we'll probably get a little bit more Elite Dark Order story happening as well. So we'll see how that goes. So overall, good show this week. And that is all I have for you this week for the AEW Dynamite review. If you have any comments, questions, feedback, you can send those to eric@thatswrestling.com. If you're listening to this as a podcast, we do this show live over on Twitch and YouTube. You can follow the link in the show notes for those channels. Also, follow us on Twitter @thatswrestling1 with the number 1. And drop us some feedback on your favorite podcast app as well. We also have a link to our Discord in the show notes as well if you want to come hang out and chit chat. So thank you everybody for tuning in. My name is Eric LaRoche. You've been watching and listening to That's Wrestling. See you later, guys.